For three-quarters of a century, the international order has relied on a foundational agreement, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Since 1949, NATO has served as the primary framework for Western security, a strategic commitment ensuring that a challenge to one member is viewed as a challenge to all. But as we move through 2026, the pillars of this long-standing alliance are being re-evaluated under a new era of America First diplomacy. The world we once knew, defined by a singular, reliable Western bloc, is facing a moment of profound transformation. With the current political climate in the United States, the conversation surrounding the Atlantic Alliance has shifted from routine cooperation to a fundamental questioning of its future. Modern leadership has openly debated the necessity of the organization, citing a desire for more equitable burden sharing among member states. This is no longer just political rhetoric. It is a structural shift. Following high-level discussions between global leaders in early 2026, European capitals are no longer viewing American support as an indefinite guarantee. We are witnessing a historic pivot where major powers like Germany and France are actively discussing strategic autonomy, the ability for Europe to manage its own defense independently of Washington. The core question facing analysts today is whether Europe possesses the unified infrastructure to maintain its own security without the traditional American backbone. This isn't just about military spending. It's about the very survival of the current world order. Today, we are conducting a deep dive analysis into the potential restructuring of the world's most significant military alliance. We will examine the logistical realities of European defense, the strategic value the U.S. gains from these partnerships, and how a shift in the status quo could empower other global players to redefine international norms. The foundation of modern diplomacy. To understand why the current tension is so significant, we must look at the history of the alliance's architecture. Following the conclusion of the Second World War, the European continent faced immense instability. NATO was established on April 4, 1949, with a clear objective: to provide a collective security umbrella that would allow democratic nations to rebuild without the fear of external pressure. At that time, the primary mission was famously described as keeping the Americans in, the Russians out, and the Germans down. The United States provided the primary leadership, nuclear deterrence, and financial backing that allowed this transition. During the decades of the Cold War, the U.S. established a massive network of permanent facilities across West Germany, Italy, and the United Kingdom. These bases were more than just military outposts. They were symbols of a permanent commitment to European democracy. However, as the decades passed, a disparity emerged. Because the American security guarantee was so robust, many European nations prioritized social and economic development, allowing their individual defense capabilities to diminish while relying on the Pentagon for regional stability. When the geopolitical landscape changed in the early 1990s following the collapse of the Soviet Union, many expected the alliance to dissolve. Instead, it underwent a significant expansion, moving into territories previously aligned with the Eastern Bloc. By 2004, the addition of nations like Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania brought the alliance directly to the borders of regional rivals. This expansion was viewed by some as a triumph of democracy, but by others as a strategic provocation, setting the stage for the intense tensions we see today in Eastern Europe. The economic reality of collective defense. As of 2026, the data reveals a stark imbalance in how the alliance is funded. For years, the U.S. has urged its partners to meet a goal of spending 2% of their GDP on defense, yet the United States still accounts for roughly 70% of NATO's total defense expenditure. This fiscal reality is at the heart of the current political friction. The U.S. commitment goes beyond funding. It involves a physical presence of over 100,000 personnel stationed across Europe. These bases in Germany, Italy, and Poland serve as strategic anchors. Furthermore, Europe is deeply integrated with American technology, including advanced missile defense systems and stealth aviation. Perhaps most critically, the U.S. provides a nuclear deterrent through specialized assets stored in partner nations like Belgium and the Netherlands. The current American administration views this as an unsustainable economic model. The push for Europe to stand on its own is no longer a fringe theory, but a central policy goal. If the US were to reduce its role, the alliance would lose not just its primary financier, but its central logistical and technological hub. This loss would create a capability gap that Europe might take decades to fill, especially in areas like satellite intelligence, long-range transport, and high-altitude surveillance. The complexity of a unified European defense. A common suggestion is that Europe should simply merge its various national forces into a single European army. While this looks feasible on paper, the logistical reality is far more complex. In early 2026, analysts pointed out that while Europe has the wealth and the population, it lacks the connective tissue of a unified military force. By 2026, regional rivals have significantly increased their defense spending, sometimes surpassing the combined investment of all European nations when adjusted for local purchasing power. The primary challenge for Europe isn't a lack of soldiers. It has over 1.4 million personnel, but a lack of unified command. Unlike a single national military, a potential European force is a mosaic of 28 different languages, legal frameworks, and command structures. Military simulations suggest that in a high-intensity crisis, a unified response would require massive amounts of coordinated heavy equipment that the European members currently cannot deploy quickly enough on their own. This has led to urgent discussions regarding a European nuclear shield, where nations like France might extend their deterrence to partners like Germany. However, developing such an independent framework would require years of structural reform and unprecedented political unity. The expiration of the New START Treaty in February 2026 has only heightened these concerns, as the guardrails for nuclear competition have effectively disappeared. Strategic consequences for the United States. It is important to note that a shift away from the alliance would also have significant implications for the United States. For over 75 years, these partnerships have functioned as a force multiplier, allowing the U.S. to lead international coalitions rather than acting alone. These alliances provide the U.S. with an invaluable network of facilities and supply routes that extend into the Middle East and Africa. Strategic hubs like Ramstein in Germany allow for rapid response capabilities across the hemisphere. Without access to these partner facilities, future American operations would become significantly more expensive and logistically difficult. Furthermore, the U.S. benefits from burden sharing and intelligence, where European partners provide critical data on regional threats that the U.S. might otherwise miss. A withdrawal wouldn't just be an exit from a treaty, it would be a voluntary reduction of American global reach. The emerging Arctic frontier, one of the most critical battlegrounds of the future, is the Arctic. As environmental changes open new trade routes and reveal vast natural resources, the region is becoming a focal point for global competition. The Northern Sea Route is quickly becoming a viable alternative to traditional shipping lanes, potentially cutting travel time between Asia and Europe by 40%. Currently, the U.S. maintains its Arctic presence through a network of allies like Canada, Norway, and Denmark. However, regional rivals have already established a massive lead, with over 50 specialized facilities and a fleet of ice-breaking vessels that far outnumbers the American capacity. If the current alliance framework weakens, the U.S. would find itself increasingly isolated in a region where China and Russia are aggressively expanding their influence. China, calling itself a near-Arctic state, is already investing billions in infrastructure and mining projects in the region, aiming to secure the resources of the future. Without the collective power of NATO, the U.S. would have to choose between a massive, expensive naval buildup or ceding control of the North to its rivals. A new global landscape. The shift in the Atlantic Alliance suggests that we are entering a new world order. While the traditional Western Bloc has been the stabilizing force of the 21st century, the rise of a multipolar world is inevitable. If a vacuum is created in Europe, other powers, specifically China, are prepared to fill it with economic and technological partnerships. We are moving toward an era of strategic realism, where every nation must reevaluate its own security and its place in the global hierarchy. The potential restructuring of NATO isn't just a political talking point, it is a signal that the rules of global engagement are being rewritten. We are seeing a world where alliances are becoming more transactional and less ideological. This geopolitical shift is also accelerating in other vital regions. In our previous analysis, we detailed the evolving relationship between the United States and the Middle East, specifically a new strategic agreement that could redefine energy markets and regional security. You can find that analysis linked on your screen now to understand the full picture of this global transition. Don't forget to like and subscribe as we continue to track these historic changes. Take care, and we'll see you in the next one.